Welcome to Connecting with Your Inner Hero. If you found your way here, you might be seeking community of individuals who face trauma and are ready to find a safe place to learn, grow, and move from surviving to thriving. We're your hosts. I'm Lisa Johnson, certified holistic health practitioner, joined by Christina Lipari, certified life and health coach. Hi, welcome back to Connecting with Your Inner Hero. I'm Lisa.
I'm Christina.
And tonight we're navigating relationships with mental health in mind. In this episode, we're focusing on loving and supporting someone with a mental health disorder while also prioritizing self-care and boundaries.
Lisa, I'm really glad that we're doing this podcast. And I think it's really important for us to get some supportive information out, as well as some education surrounding mental health and the challenges that not just the individual who goes through the mental health challenges, but also the person who loves the individual going through the mental health challenges as well.
Absolutely. I believe it's really important because when we are experiencing our mental health challenges, especially because of CPTSD, all of the damage that the person endured was relational damage. And that means that all the healing generally occurs within relationships as well. And that's not something that's necessarily easy. And I do really think that sometimes the focus is always on the person that is experiencing the issues. I think it's really important that we also focus on the person that is supporting the person through their healing process, especially understanding that really in some way, shape, or form, we're all going through some type of process, right?
Yeah, I agree. And that's been, again, the topic of conversation because the individuals that have reached out to me are the ones that love someone with a mental health disorder. And they're trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I heal? How do I approach the loved one? Because they're truly at a total loss, especially depending on the mental health challenge that they have. It truly can be its own little nightmare inside of the relationship, not just for the person who struggles with the disorder, but also for the person in the relationship, because there's really a communication breakdown. Each individual needs to understand how to communicate with each other when not only the relationship is healthy, but also when the relationship is going through these different challenges, and creating a safety plan, creating those safe words, and really understanding how to communicate with each other. I think that's where couples miss the approach on how to be healthy in a relationship, as well as family members. And again, something that I've seen is childhood PTSD has become a factor. And so not only are they dealing with the mental health disorder, there's also a lot of CPTSD involved too. And so there's a lot of triggers that are associated with that communication between each other. I think it's really important for us to give a little bit of education as well as support. One of the things I believe that we should talk about first off, how the stigma of mental health is placed in a lot of our lives, because there's not enough education and we don't educate ourselves until we're in that environment. And then we're at a point where we're at a loss.
Exactly. I believe that stigma is getting decreased with a lot of the expansive knowledge and education that the public is just being provided in general now. But it's really difficult sometimes to overcome in these areas, and also sometimes to ask for help because of the stigma around mental health issues, especially if it's a child that is in a relationship with a parent, whether they are a child or whether they are an adult child with an adult parent. There's stigma surrounding that. And I know that just personally, as a person growing up with a parent that was struggling with their own mental health issues, sometimes people will look at the child and say, oh my gosh, are they going to be just like them? Or sometimes if you're just trying to support another family member, trying to get that assistance and trying to find people that you can share what's going on in your life with without feeling judged, and to be able to experience that compassion instead of shame. There are a lot of ways that sometimes people might behave towards you if they don't understand what's going on. Sometimes you get poor advice because obviously people don't know what's going on. So I think that some of those things are really important to discuss. Okay. I think it's very important that we destigmatize mental health in relationships. And I think it's very important to do that because we, as people that are in relationships with people that have mental health issues, there can be a lot of shame, there can be a lot of judgment, there can be time off from work because you have to take care of people. So I think it's really important that we learn how to approach our situations with safe people and also have the opportunity to come at this with curiosity and compassion, not just for the person that's experiencing the mental health issue, but also for the person that is in support of.
I agree. And also the stigma of thinking that you're alone, that the person won't change, family won't help, that your life goals are gone because now you're taking care of someone that has a mental health disorder. Depending on what disorder it is, some of them can be extremely challenging on a day-to-day basis. And even medication bias. Obviously, you and I are both not licensed therapists, we're coaches, but there is a lot to do with medication bias when it comes to mental health disorders. Sometimes when they're on their medication, they feel phenomenal, and then they decide to stop taking the medication. And truly, it's what us as partners or family members and how we approach that. You can get support. It's so important, again, for us to really understand that aspect of mental health and understand that there is help out there and that it is becoming less of a stigma and more of a reality of what individuals are going through. And again, it's because they're finding out that there's a lot of different reasons why people have mental health disorders, either inherited due to just health issues, due to diet, but that's some of the information that's being put out there. And so people are starting to read it and educate themselves because they're noticing that there is an uptick when it comes to mental health disorders.
Absolutely. And I think that the research that's out there that's being done is so amazing as far as neurobiology is concerned, and also all the studies and the information that are coming out just about relationships in general and about how to set those boundaries with the people. Like you're talking about, first off, medication. Not everybody's on medication, but there are some people that do need to be medicated or do choose to be medicated. And that's always a personal choice between a person and their doctor, which is great. But like you talked about, there can be some ups and downs if a person is on them and then off of them and then on them and then off of them. And setting relationship goals and setting relationship boundaries in order to not end up on a codependent roller coaster is extremely important as well, because if you don't have the boundaries, then you're not able to care for yourself. And a great example would be to make sure that you have trusted people in your circle that you can talk with. Maybe you have a therapist, maybe you have a specific support group that you're going to. And it's also about finding things that you yourself enjoy to do so you can fill your cup back up. You can't give out of an empty cup. Maybe it's art. Maybe you just like to take some quiet time and go walk in the forest, or maybe you need to meet your friends and get out of the environment for a little bit.
Agree. And I think that truly is one of the biggest aspects of being in a relationship with mental health challenges is that you'd have to set goals, but you also have to set boundaries for the relationship. You come at it with compassion and as well as curiosity for educating yourself on how to continue to love that individual and also create that support system for you, because it seems like there's a theme when it comes to different topics that were discussed. I don't understand why they are the way they are. I don't understand why they do what they do. And I don't understand why they can't talk to me about how they're feeling. If you don't have communication, then obviously there's going to be a breakdown, just not in the health aspect, but also in the relationship aspect. And when it comes to mental health, you have to create those communication boundaries, because someone who has a disorder, they get triggered very easily.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in a relationship with someone who gets triggered and you don't know how to respond to them, you can escalate that mania or that depression, it's important to have positive words. Learn how to respond to the person that you love and not react. And that, again, has been the consistent theme, is that each individual, because they don't know how to, I don't want to say deal with, because those
they don't know how
terms,
to navigate.
Correct. Exactly.
I think navigate is a really good word, because that's sometimes what it is.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's the thing, is people who come to us, they say, oh, I can't deal with this. And so that's why that word that comes to my mind. And that's what I heard pretty consistently. And as you said, as we get more educated with mental health, it is truly about navigating. It's understanding the communication boundaries, understanding how to approach them, because you and I both know when it comes to triggers, if you come at me and say, Christina, you're always unhappy, you're always negative when you walk through the door, that small little word always can be a trigger, and you don't even realize it.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to educate yourself about what the person might be experiencing, because they might not have the words for it, or they don't even know how to describe the ups and the downs and such. And if you, as a support person, have the understanding of, say, you're living with a person that has bipolar mania, being able to educate yourself and recognize the signs of being in a manic state versus being able to understand and recognize the signs of being in a more balanced state. But being able to recognize the different stages that a person might be in, and understanding what the components are and having a plan for that time when that could be happening. And then when you're talking about the communicating, you're going to communicate with the person different when they're in each different stage. And I think also becoming educated about your own self and becoming self-aware about your own triggers, because everybody's got baggage, right? And what is the interplay between yourself and that other person? What are the things that perpetuate a crazy cycle? And what are the things that contribute to better communication, curiosity, love in action, all of those types of things? I think that it's really important for the support person to be able to step back from the situation emotionally in order to be able to actually see and deduce what's going on. Sometimes a person will start speaking in hyperbole, like, you always do this, you always do that. That might be a good indicator for the support person to say, oh, I can see they're really struggling right now, because now they've gone from their reasonable, wise mind to a hyperbolic emotional state, which means that now we need to deal with this a little bit different.
And then also having that safety plan in effect when that does transpire, because what most people will do once they recognize that individual is having a reaction, they'll get upset or walk away, or they get frustrated or angry or whatever that emotion looks like for the person, the loved one. And even though we don't understand and we're having our emotion and our feeling, we continue to trigger them. So it's truly being able to have that safe word and understanding and having that plan beforehand, sitting down when the individual, maybe the person who is bipolar, has a more balanced approach at that time. You come up with that safety plan saying, okay, if you respond like, this is the action that I will take, and understand this action I am taking is my time out, or this is the safety word that I'm going to utilize, so that way we both can take a time out. Because if you don't discuss it beforehand and someone responds in a negative way, the person with the mental health disorder responds in a negative way, and you get upset and get angry or frustrated and you say, I need a timeout, and you turn around and walk away, that individual, and I say this from experience, is going to come chasing you, because they want to be heard and they want you to understand what they're feeling, and they want you to understand the frustration and the anger or whatever it is that they're cycling on going in their mind. And you're just like, I just need to escape because I'm trying to de-escalate you. But instead you escalated them to now chase you to be able to have that conversation, because they saw that as a negative. And so those safety plans of saying, okay, if you respond this way, I'm going to say, this is our safety word. I'm going to step out of the room for 15 minutes. I will come back and we'll check in. And then at that time, if we can have a conversation, we will. But if we can't, then again, I'll remove myself. But it's also about not leaving either. I think that's one of
I think that's huge.
themes like that I've seen as well.
Yeah, when the other person knows that, oh my gosh, they're not leaving me, they're just going to calm down. And you're having that conversation, that moment to say, hey, look, I need to calm down for a second myself.
Yes.
I'm going to do this and I'm going to come back in 15 minutes, and letting that other person know, I think is huge. Being able to become educated enough about yourself, about the other person and what their experience is, and being able to de-escalate is, I think, a huge key in setting these boundaries and to help with that support. 100%.
Agreed. It's truly about making sure that individual that you love knows you're coming back, knows that this is the safety plan, knows that you are engaging them the way they need to be engaged with, so you can continue to have a healthier conversation. And also go back to triggers. One thing that, again, that I've seen more recently, and also in the relationship that I was in that had a mental health disorder, is you also have to understand the outside triggers, such as alcohol, drugs, caffeine, diet, environment. What a lot of individuals don't understand about mental health disorders is that those are also triggers. So when you have those other triggers, there are times that your partner's balanced and you walk into a party and then they start drinking alcohol. And then all of a sudden there's negative reaction coming from that individual. And you're like, wait a second, when we walked in here, everything was great. What happened? So you also have to set boundaries around that too. And that's extremely hard because there are individuals who like their alcohol. There are individuals that like the drugs, and they feel that it makes them feel better. And when that makes them feel better and you're trying to take away that tool from them, or that high, or whatever that looks like, that also can create a trigger. And that's, again, where you come up with that safety plan and that before communication of what it looks like. Hey, we're going to this party. So what do we do when we walk into this party? Are we going to drink? What does that look like so we can be prepared?
Yeah, I think that's really wise, especially when sometimes things go just fine and there's not a big problem, and then sometimes things just don't. And honestly, that happens, I would say, it could happen in any type of relationship, whether the person has a mental health disorder or not. If, in all honesty, I think that's just good advice for any relationship. I think that when we're talking about communication and boundaries, and we're talking about creating plans for when things are going sideways, when a person is in a better state of mind, asking them, hey, when you are feeling this way, or when you are feeling triggered, or when I can see you're using hyperbolic talk, or when I can see that you're in this whatever state, what is it that you can say you need in those moments? Because then that gives the person that's providing the support something that they can do.
So I have a question for you. What if it persists and you have a partner or a family member who doesn't care about getting the help, doesn't care about having a safety plan, and truly is just, unfortunately, gone down the rabbit hole and chooses not to come back out of it?
Yeah, that's a really rough one. I myself have been in that situation with people that are struggling. And if you are having that type of relationship challenge where you're finding that this relationship is becoming harmful to you because of the things that are happening, and this other person wants to go their own way and they want to go do their own thing, sometimes you have to let them. And in that case, you need a definite support system around yourself. If it's something to where you have to go no contact with somebody, if it's a relationship that you're in with a spouse, then you need to get the advice that you need from the appropriate professional on where to go from there. And I think that there's at some point you have to draw a line within yourself and for yourself, because you have to take care of yourself ultimately.
I agree. I know that one of the biggest things I dealt with is I recognized that I lost myself in that relationship that I was in. I had my goals and I had my aspirations, and I had to put my education on hold. And then also you realize that if you have a child, or if there's children in that relationship, that they also get affected because your time is now taken away from them because you are focused on the person with mental health disorder. And so you recognize that as you are in this relationship and you see the different challenges, you really have to step back and say, is this harmful for me? Also think about if it's harmful for the child that's in the relationship. And I think also when it comes to something that's really sensitive to discuss is not only if it becomes harmful for the person who's the loved one, but also when the person with that mental health disorder starts trying to harm themselves, you really have to take aggressive action, because obviously that person with that mental health disorder, they can't help themselves at that point. People are always afraid to call the cops or to call an individual to help them or the paramedics, because now that individual is going to have a tag on them, the stigma on them. But truly, it's a life that you need to save if you get to that point. And it is one of the hardest things to do. I've had to do it. And
you can't enable behavior, right, poor behavior, because then that's just going to continue that behavior. It's just you're just perpetuating it.
Right.
Realistically. And I've been in those types of positions as well with family members. And sometimes you have to make that hard decision because it forces the help.
100.
I think it's really important to get that help. Like you're talking about, like sometimes you can't gauge how bad things are until you decide to get the help. Sometimes you have to call, like you're talking about, the police. Sometimes you have to call the ambulance. Sometimes you have to call the CPS worker. Sometimes you have to call the appropriate person. And I think what's interesting is, as we're talking about when do you know when it's okay to walk away, sometimes you need those people in your life to shine the light on the situation to let you know how bad it is. Because when you're living in the middle of it, you can't see the forest for the trees.
And that's the thing, is sometimes we wait too long and we have to walk away because we waited too long, because we were so afraid of the stigma. We were so afraid to open up. I know when I was going through it, depending on the disorder, some people, they're fantastic around others, and other people never see what you're feeling and experiencing in a relationship. And so you're afraid to say, hey, this is what's going on inside of my relationship. And because people are going to be like, no way. She's always in a good mood. He's always happy. He's always laughing. You guys always seem to be great when you're together. So it's hard to come out and say, actually, no, this is what's going on, because people are going to judge you opposed to really looking at the bigger picture of what's going on in a relationship. But what you have to realize is if you don't get the help sooner than later, your relationship might not be there. Yeah. Your suicidal tendencies might come out. You can harm not just yourself, but also others involved, like children or like people who are in that relationship if it's family members. So it's so important to speak out and speak up.
Absolutely. And really the loving act is getting the help.
Right.
Hiding something is not loving. That's just keeping something undercover, and it's keeping something in the dark, where God's word tells us that we bring things out into the light in order for them to be healed. And the more that we hide in shame, the more that we hide in fear, the more that we hide in these places, that means that we're not going to get the help for ourselves and for all the other people that are involved in this situation. So I think that it's really important to know what those boundaries are, when it's time to stay, when it's time to go.
And it's funny that you bring that up in regards to faith-based, because I'm in a lot of different support groups, and then some of the individuals I've talked to are believers, and these support groups that I'm in, they're believers as well. And obviously vows are huge, right? When you get married, if it is a partner, you get married, it's till sickness and health, death do you part in a situation. And I know that people choose not to leave because they're afraid of their vows.
There's a stigma in the church about you don't get divorced.
Correct. And I know for me, I was in a relationship and with someone who had a mental health disorder. And that was the hardest thing for me to get past. Was I'm married. I provided my vows to this individual. For me, what I didn't understand, it was like, okay, in the Bible, it says adultery, you can divorce for adultery, but it didn't say you can get divorced because of mental health disorder. And so it took me going and talking to a pastor and going and talking to different support groups to understand that, listen, pray, have that conversation with God. Here's some scripture. Here's some tools for you. Ultimately, it is your decision, but at the same time, you have to protect yourself.
Yeah. I think that's a very important component, because sometimes it's not just religiousness in church. Sometimes it's also other family members or other people that might be telling you that you need to stay. And relationships in general aren't always easy. It's as iron sharpens iron, right? When you're in a space with somebody, they are going to rub against all of those rough spots that you have, and you're going to rub against theirs, and there's going to be character flaws, and there's going to be all of these things that come out into the light that you can't hide anymore. You're living in a space with somebody and they're going to see everything, right? There's just no way around that. And there are definitely certain things that can be worked on. And I would say get the help. But when you start to feel that you are losing yourself in a relationship, when you start to feel like you're getting into the space where you don't know who you are anymore, or you're always having to trade bits and pieces of yourself in order to make somebody else happy or to placate them, and they don't seem to want to participate in the education, right? They should be educating themselves about their own disorders. They should be educating themselves about what it's going to take to be in a healthy relationship.
The nice thing is there's different support groups out there. There's a group that's called NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Health Illness. They have support groups, they have educational material, and they have classes. So I took a 12-week class that broke down each mental health disorder, talked about all the different medications. It talked about the triggers. It talked about everything that someone who was trying to continue a relationship, if you're faith-based, there's Celebrate Recovery. If the individual has any type of dependency, there's Al-Anon. Even as someone who does love an individual with a mental health disorder, sometimes you find yourself codependent. I joined a codependent group, had no clue it existed until one day my counselor said, "You're codependent." And I said,
well, what does that mean?
What I learned about codependent, it was a weakness. And I was like, nope, that's not me. I'm not codependent. And she's, "Do you understand what codependent means?" And I said, "Yeah." And she's all, "No, I don't think you do." And so she explained it to me, and I was like, oh, okay, like I'm there trying to fix this person and help this person and do everything for this person. And that's a codependency and I was like, no, I'm just trying to be the person, the fixer, the helper, the this. No, that's codependency.
Yeah. So, you're thinking it's coming from a good and right place and a good and right heart.
Right.
But you're not really realizing the damage that's causing with this, in this relationship for yourself and for this other person. So it's really important to get that outside education and that outside opinion to help you to see the blind sides and help you to see the spots that you just don't know, because you don't know what you don't know. Right?
And you're enabling them too when you're codependent on them. And that's the thing that you're like, no, I'm just loving them and helping them and fixing them. And it's no, not really.
No, we don't need to do that. Yeah.
Right.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like you as an individual, you set your goals, your boundaries, how you want to communicate, your safety plan, and how you take care of you to be healthy in that relationship. And then they, like you said, need to figure out how to take care of themselves, either through like Celebrate Recovery, 12-step program, going to a therapy, a life coach, educating themselves, finding the support groups.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so important. And I think that's the biggest mishap in a relationship is this person has to do their work. This person has to do their work. This allows you to be healthy. When
Correct.
one of them is off, it makes it where it's challenging to continue communication, to stay in the relationship, to be able to have that healthy relationship. And so that's where the breakdown comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this has been a really helpful discussion because a lot of people talk about mental health issues, or I hear a lot of podcasts that are for the person that's experiencing the mental health issue, but I don't hear as much information about the person that's supporting the loved one or the individual. And I think it's really important to just balance that love, the boundaries, and making sure to take care of yourself. Self-care isn't just, oh, let me go sit in the bubble bath with some candles and whatever, like everybody says, oh, you got to have your self-care. Maybe it is that, but you really have to do your own work and have your own support system outside of just this person and just this relationship.
Agreed. And one thing that I always encourage individuals, and I think we've talked about this for each podcast that we've been on, is journaling. And the reason why I say journaling, especially in situations like this, is because one, you'll be able to identify triggers. Let's say a situation happens and you're able to go in and journal about it. And then when it's not heated anymore, you can look back and go, okay, this is what triggered my partner. This is what triggered the family member. And because I did trigger them, now when they're balanced and that opportunity is there, let's talk about it. Let's come up with a safety plan around that aspect of it. And I think that's the part where journaling has really helped individuals to be able to identify where they need the support, where they need the education from, and then being able to go now to their therapist and say, okay, this is what transpired. I want to discuss this and have this conversation so that way I can do better next time. And so I agree, really educating, creating the boundaries, and truly having that partner understand that you do love them.
Exactly. Yeah. And those boundaries actually are really good too, because that helps them to see the areas that they need to work on as well. And it's really loving to have those boundaries. And I think that in the long run, that creates that stability. And the stability is what's really needed in order to either to be able to heal or to want to work towards whatever those goals are, or to stay on the medication, or to stay on doing the things that keep them healthy, because they can see that, oh no, this person over here has these loving boundaries for me. They're important. And they also help me to want to do better in a lot of ways. So I think that when we quit enabling and we set those healthy boundaries.
Agreed. It just creates a happier inner self, to find that inner hero on both sides.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast today and connecting with your inner hero. We want to reaffirm that with proper support, education, and open communication, that these challenges can lead to stronger relationships. We do have a worksheet for you, so be sure to hop into the show notes. Not only do we have a worksheet for you, we do also have all of the resources listed that we referred to today in the podcast. And we do look forward to having you joining us next time.
Let us know in the comments what part of the episode resonated with you the most. Don't forget to follow and hit the notification bell to get updates on our newest episodes. Until then, be brighter and remember, healing is always within reach.